Hi everybody, welcome to GeekSpaceTV. Let's start this all over again. I'm good at gesticulating without words. I have popcorn, animated popcorn. It's delicious. She was surprised that I could eat most of this container. We're already halfway through and she made it about 5 minutes ago.
I wasn't surprised that you could, I was surprised that you did. Different.
Semantics. Semantics. And thank you for that donation. Inquiring minds want to know donated $14.28. What new halfling developments have been decided? What new interesting details about the pastry deity and his clergy have been created? Are there any other new fun and interesting deities that have been discovered? This is very deity focused. Like, not in a bad way, just you want to know a lot about deities. I also consume a lot of popcorn. I like a lot of popcorn. It just nicely continues to go into your mouth without really having to think about it. And they're just like such little tiny bite-sized things. Nom 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 nom. So how are you guys doing today? It's wonderful to see you here. Popcorn is in your perfect good food. My container is almost empty, but it's fine. I believe Anna is setting up Sirenscape. You're back. Alright, I'm gonna pause a second and do a proper introduction. That involves me not eating as much popcorn. Hello and welcome to GeekSpaceTV. If you happen to be new here, apologize for the clapping. You are watching GeekSpaceTV. We're a non-profit broadcasting studio based in the Seattle area. Our mission is to promote and increase diversity and inclusion within gaming and geek spaces. And we are delighted to have you here for today's episode of Behind the Screens, in which I teach Anna how to be a better GM, because apparently I am an expert. I think I put all the air quotes in the right places.
No, because while there may be teach Anna how to be a better GM, that might work. You are an expert. Own it.
I have
Own
expertise.
It. I am an expert broadcast producer on Twitch.
You are. That is true.
And you are
Fine.
an expert GM.
I am an expert Twitch GM.
And I will fight you. Like, over this, I will.
Okay.
So anyway, hasten for it.
I am here to
Hi everyone. Sorry.
share and impart my knowledge as well as the knowledge of the community together in order to help Anna and other individuals feel better prepared to run campaigns for themselves. I do surrender. I got excited because I finally got the low latency thing, so I was noticing the low latency in chat, and I was like, why did it take so... Anyway, we're here. It's all good. Paladin Hulk, thank you for donating $5.69. Our orcs is still made for fighting. Our orcs is still made for fighting. I don't know what that voice was, but it was one. Welcome to GM Dome. 2 streamers enter. Hopefully they both leave intact.
Yeah, hopefully. Right.
I am professional, that is true. I do get paid to GM, which is one of the coolest statements I have ever said about myself in my life.
Right? That's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. I get paid to make up stories, and I'm totes on board with that.
So before we dive into like the actual content of the channel or anything like that,
do you have to make an
talk
excuse
about...
for why you don't have your homework? Where are my cupcakes? No, that's okay. I take that back.
I will explain where your gosh darn cupcakes are. No. I was going to say we need to talk about what's going on Friday on the channel.
This Friday we are doing 2 things. Count them, 2 things. At 6 p.m. Pacific time.
Yes, 6 p.m.
We're going to throw you guys off.
This many.
With our times. So, Friday I will be running a one-shot of an RPG. It falls into the category of RPG, but it's a very story-based, kind of character-driven story. And by I am running, I mean mostly I am there to tell people what the rules are, which are very simple. But we will be running a game called BFF, which is a story of girlhood, friendship, and oh shoot, what's the third thing? It's girlhood, friendship, and something else. And it is a lovely game. You can go check it out on Kickstarter. I watched the Kickstarter video, and it's absolutely adorable because it is a mother and a son who created this game together. And I definitely recommend you go take a look at it. It's got a bunch of girlhood, friendship, and adventure. I saw the word. And it's posting the link in chat. You should go check that out. So we will be streaming. It's going to be a short one because the way the game is structured is a little bit atypical for a lot of RPGs. Basically, you kind of create your characters. They're very simple in terms of what you create. And then you go to a hangout. And there are hangout locations. And then each one sort of tells you how many scenes will be in the hangout. And so we're basically going to just do one hangout, which is pretty cool. I recommend. And then after that, we'll go drink some wine. Yeah. And talk about stuff. I think that's also probably part of it.
Yeah. See, the wine is really so that my ability to resist telling people my secrets is lowered. So that's when we're going to talk about some programming that is actually going to start. No, I guess it still won't be for a few weeks. There's some surprises about what's going on for our programming that I want the opportunity to talk to everyone about, and the best way to do that is a wind down. There's also that'll be a good time if anyone has questions about the fundraiser that we're going to be doing on the 26th. That's a good time to ask those as well, like, why are we doing a fundraiser? Didn't we just do a fundraiser? Because I sure feel like we did.
It was like 3 months ago.
I know, but I feel like we just did it.
No, I know, I'm with you. I know.
So, like, yeah, lots of guilt, always, lots of guilt. But we're yeah, I don't want to get into it right now because it'll be too much like, please send money. I don't want to do that. That's not, But we're going to have a fundraiser Friday night during Wind Down. We can talk about the exact numbers if people want me to get into them, or you can always ask me on Discord. I'm happy to be as transparent as we possibly can be. So I will happily tell you all about our accounts if you want to know. And
we nonprofit.
Yeah. So yeah, we nonprofit.
In answer to your question, Pumpkin, the system is, I would say, rather. It's probably slice of life is the best way I describe it. Is you are basically playing through a slice of life in the life of middle school girls.
Kitty Cat, thank you for that $5. And scary elf is scary. Hashtag Lauren scared of elf sent by.
I am. She can take me on with her mind powers.
I can't actually kill you with my brain.
See, I think you're just telling me that to lure me into a false sense of security.
So, yeah, it's more realism. And don't forget, if you want us to more easily see any questions in chat, say Anna or Lauren or GeekSpaceTV.
Or question.
Or question. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think GeekSpaceTV isn't actually one of them. Whatever, it's fine.
Whatever, it's cool. It's cool. So, that'll be Friday night, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah, mostly because of the wine. No.
I definitely was like, Anna, you can't do a wind down before I have to run an RPG. Like, please don't do that to me, because then I can't drink wine during the wind down.
I was talking about it. I was talking about how we're doing a wind down after on my stream, and like 8 o'clock for us at night is like 3 in the morning, 5 in the morning for Europe and the UK and stuff. So it was like, I'm sorry, but because some of the stuff that we're going to talk about is going to be relevant to our potential European and UKian viewers. So yeah, sorry.
I would say there's definitely Discord is a good place if you have a burning question that you want to have answered. If you tag us over there or Anna over there, like we can we can make sure that gets answered either in Discord or also
Yeah.
live on air.
And I'll make sure that the VOD will be available here on Twitch for at least a couple weeks, and I'll probably end up setting it up so that it's shareable. So there's a link to it, but it doesn't show up any other way, because that seems best. On YouTube, I mean.
That makes sense.
So there you go. UKians are also European.
For now.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch that one. All I know is I've heard enough. They're European and they're not European to be like, whoa, not touching it.
That's for the best.
Yeah.
That is for the best.
I could specify Frenchians and Germanians if that would also, like, I could single out a couple of other portions of potentially Europe.
Other side of the Pondians.
Yeah, other side of the Pondians. That's a good all-encompassing term. Yeah.
And then you can be like,
Yep.
which pun? And you can be like, all of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait,
I
no,
think
because
that's
Canada's
everything.
across some ponds.
Yeah. Whatever. So that's Friday night.
And then
Tonight,
if you make Amy angry, then you have a cross pond. Doctor Who joke.
I wish I had my judgment face on my coffee mug. I don't know
know.
why I haven't done that yet.
Are we just going to tell them then?
I've been talking about it for a while.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to get my geek pun emote and put it here, and she can get her R2's glare. Is that what? Glare? I always just click on the...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier. So, tonight, our news is guess what's coming back? You guys should hopefully already know. Leviathan Distant Stars returns for season 3.
Wait, we don't have another episode of High School? No. I am super excited that Leviathan is coming back.
I am also very excited.
Do we have any hints about what Dan is playing now?
I actually, we need to talk about some stuff because
Oh,
I have
dear.
some ideas. And it's whether or not you'll let us do them because
God.
they're not technically that complicated.
Okay, we'll talk after this show.
I did make him a new costume.
It's fine.
I also left it, but it's a monstrosity. And he said yes, he wanted it. I don't know why. I laughed a lot at the emails that we sent back and forth to each other. And it's gonna be wonderful. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to bring Leviathan back. Is Dan playing Dave In and Out Thomas? Oh, god damn him. No. I asked him, and he asked for it first, and then I was like, okay, I'll sketch it for you and confirm that this is what you want. And I sent him the sketch,
Yeah.
and I believe his response was, yes, I will wear that every week in all caps. So I can tell you that Kika and Thea and Rachel and Ziana are all returning, and Dan is back. Because I didn't feel like I could keep that part a secret.
No, and yeah, no, it's Dan is back. Mm-hmm. I'm glad Dan is back. I'm happy to
I am too.
to have him back on board.
When we had a cast meeting, I was like, oh, this feels right. Because I had to glare at him several times.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So that is pretty much all of the Geek Space news for this week. Which means we're ready to talk about what we're going to talk about on today's episode of Behind the Screens. So the main thing that the thing that I'm going to talk about today is building encounters for unpredictable players, aka everyone I have ever played with at my table ever. Because people talk a lot about what do I mean by this? So planning is kind of the process is going to look different for everyone. So one of the things that I really want to make clear today is that this is what I do. This might not work for you. This might not work for you. The hope is that you can look at parts of it and be like, oh, I like that. That feels good. And you can build yourself a system that you will feel comfortable planning in, because everybody's strategies are going to be different. Everybody's comfort is different. And like the way you kind of negotiate that. And also even the same person will plan differently for different groups, because of the story, the setting, the players, and all of those things. So we're going to kind of talk about what it looks like to plan a session and break down like some of the differences you might find between planning an episode versus planning an encounter versus planning a session. And I tend to think in sessions. So, how many potential AU spin-offs could be spawned off of one season? One season of what?
Yeah.
Like infinite, depending on the show?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Can you elaborate,
yeah,
Danger Mouse?
because I was at one point talking about like Stargate, and like Stargate literally has infinite parallel universes built into the canon of the show. So I'm like, that show you could do literally infinite parallel universe, alternate universe versions.
Also Star Trek and countless other ones that you could do that with.
Yeah. How long of a session? Unpredictable players. This from someone who literally has random in it. I'm not saying that I am not also an unpredictable player at times.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear that I am not passing a judgment value on the phrase unpredictable players. I actually think that they are my favorite kind of player.
Well, before the show, you started talking about the Right Clique a little bit, and how they were phenomenal at finding alternative ways of doing things, and they really, really were. So
Unconventional problem-solving methods was the hallmark of the Right Click. So that's actually, I'm going to use like an example because one, it's already happened. It's happened here on GeekSpace, so there's no spoilers for it. And they're a really good example of
we just had a Critical Role moment for Leviathan.
What is this?
When does Leviathan come on? Countless times. Okay. I've been a moderator for Geek and Sundry for a long time. And always, there's like 5 different when is Critical Role commands in Geek and Sundry's
Really?
chat. Because people come into earlier shows like that, not meaning to be rude, but genuinely curious, and ask when the show they want to see is on. I'm like, all right, that's pretty cool. We just had a Critical Role moment.
Yeah. Thanks, Lasticar. Also 7 p.m. Pacific time.
Don't take this away from me, chat.
I've never clearly not spent enough time in Geek and Sundry's chats.
It's fine. If I didn't moderate, then I would probably just close the chat.
Okay. Deceptive Mirror, I get your question now, DM. Asking how many potential plot points in a session do you need to map out? So like how much do you plan for what the players might do? And that is an excellent question. And I'm going to talk about my strategies for this. And I'm going to reference some other people's strategies that I know that they do as well. And that's actually one of the core things that I kind of want to talk about today. But Anna, when is Leviathan coming on?
4.5 hours.
So, when you are planning, we talked last time about planning, like there's like your span, right? There's your scale of planning, and if we imagined there is the campaign on this one massive scale. But knowing your overall arc of your campaign doesn't really help you in the nitty-gritty when you start an episode and you sit down at the table and you're like, all right, hi guys, players, oh shit. So you need to sort of start condensing that down, and the bigger your scope, the farther away from today's session you are, the more loosey-goosey things are likely to be. And you eventually scale yourself all the way down to whatever manageable chunk for you makes sense to plan, and to plan in some level of detail. And for me, I think of it as a session, and I define a session for myself as a story arc that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. That there is a thing that happens, and it will conclude in some way. And that is what I plan for. And I think that came from when I would run home RPG games that were 4 to 5 hours long. That was how much we could do in 4 to 5 hours. In a streamed RPG, that is typically what we can do in 2 episodes. So I don't tend to plan an episode because I find that 3 hours is too short to get a full and satisfying beginning, middle, and an end. And I really like doing the cliffhanger at the end of the first episode to then conclude in the second one. Because typically with a beginning, middle, and end, you have a climax of dramatic action where things look like they're going horribly wrong. That's a really fun place to leave people hanging. So I almost imagine everything that I plan for Twitch is almost always like a 2-part episode. Sometimes that'll expand to 3, but that's where you need to have a rise, a fall, and then a second rise, and a fall again. So... but you might find that your session amount that you want to plan is going to be shorter because the longer you plan, the less certain the second half is going to be. The further away you are from the very moment of the beginning of the session, the less definitive you can plan for, because the more choices the players will have made that can result in a different outcome. Yeah. So finding what your... We need a website, winnerisleviathan.com. Do we need that?
No.
So I would say that finding your just right amount of planning is going to vary depending on who you are and how comfortable you are with uncertainty. The question of peak break time is cliff. Oh, yes, of course it is. TV shows don't go to a break.
There's a reason that TV has been doing this for ages. So, and even like some movies now that are designed to be in sequence are doing that as well. No, there's a very good reason for it. It improves viewership.
Mm-hmm. People, if you don't have a cliffhanger, and also like I would say this from a non-streamed perspective. If you do end up spanning your your session over 2 weeks and you end the characters on a cliffhanger, I guarantee you are way more likely to get those people to come back the next time you want to schedule it because they want to know what happens to their characters.
Yep.
They are much more invested if there's a cliffhanger than if everything is beautifully dramatically resolved.
Yeah.
So cliffhangers are really useful. I don't know if I've ever had a literal cliffhanger.
Where somebody is like
hanging off a cliff. Yeah. I don't think I've had that. Challenge accepted.
Lauren is like, goal unlocked. Ooh, totally not Solixin. Thank you for that $5.69. Oops, I tripped and fell and dropped some money. Thank you for dropping it in the geek space.
It's really convenient how we just have this trap. I mean, we didn't set that up. No, that wasn't for you to trip over and drop all your money in our bucket. That is a fair point. If we, ending on a cliffhanger does involve some work. And it does not always happen. There are episodes that I have not always succeeded. So you're kind of, when we're planning, your first step is to figure out what your manageable chunk of action is, which, at its minimum, needs to be the amount of material you need for one play session, like to sit down at the table and then to leave the table, which, when you're streaming, is the amount you need to cover 3 hours of time. When you're in a home game, it's the amount that you need to cover however long you guys normally play for. So that needs to be your minimum, and then your maximum is wherever your comfort level is. And for me, I tend to do a minimum, and then I do half the maximum. So I don't fully plan the second half, which is really nice because, I have some of it laid down so that typically I am planning about once every 2 weeks. And that's what tends to happen with Leviathan, is that I will plan twice as much 1 week, and then I will plan almost nothing the next week because I'll be like, no, they haven't done this yet. It worked real slow. Oh, it does suck when someone cancels a show that ends on a cliffhanger. That does suck. Wait, Leviathan's not coming back now?
Oh, dear. No, I hopefully will never have to cancel another show on the day it's supposed to air again.
Yeah. I hope that. I also hope that never happens.
Yeah.
I also hope that never happens.
So anyway,
We'll just do fanfic for ourselves.
do we have Sirenscape on? Can the mods let me know if that's audible at all? Because I can't hear it, but hopefully you all can.
As far as I know, Leviathan's still happening tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I kind of wanted to do is talk through how I planned Right Click, because it's 4 weeks, and I think it's a good example of...
Sorry, they hear cheering and crowds. That's because we're in the marketplace of a port town.
Ooh,
It was Bugbear Battle, but
that seems overly dramatic.
yeah.
Like, where the frell are my notes, or how are these not... Or are these organized? Okay, cool. There we go.
We are happy we can oblige, Oscor. Live
Oh.
GM tips on their drive home
Excellent.
from work.
I also have a whiteboard today, so I'm feeling very teachery. We are channeling my innermost teacher.
I'm seeing if I have that. I need to get dry erase.
That's fine. I have one. We can work with the one. Wait, is someone a rouge Santa runner?
Rogue.
Rouge.
Rogue.
So
Rogue.
I mean, if
Save
you
Leviathan
want to
on
get us on
Netflix.
Netflix,
Yeah, seriously, if you
Please.
can get them on Netflix,
Please do.
I will cancel the show for them.
Yeah.
So they can go onto Netflix. No, that would be a good. No, you guys can go and do that. It's fine.
all right.
Just remember me, okay?
You're gonna
remember me well.
You're gonna be coming with us.
Right. Anyway.
So, yeah, I figured the best way for me to talk about how I would go about planning a session is to break down one that I have planned and kind of go through what that looks like. Yeah, you need an executive producer. I'm sorry. You're an expert.
Okay. First off, executive producers usually are just supplying the money.
That's fair.
Second, if you're on Netflix, you can do better than this. Because I'm an expert live broadcast producer
Okay.
for mediums like Twitch, for YouTube, things like that. But you get to a certain tier of gear, and I don't know it.
You can learn.
Which is what I'm doing for here, is learning better cameras like this one, which I forgot to adjust the focus on. Again, as I do.
I'm just gonna stand here while she focuses. Okay. So, right click.
It got turned on to autofocus accidentally.
It could be worse then.
Yeah,
There are worse things for it to be on.
it's fine.
Than
But my
auto
hand, my
not
fingers
focus.
were in front of it. It was great. MLG Pro Strummer. That's me. I'm having a day, guys. All right.
cool, you're
I'm
here.
having a day.
So I guess my question is what has been in the past when you have GM'd, which was a while ago, but you have done it. Kind of what was your approach that you have used or that you think you would go into using? What would that look like right now?
I used a pre-made module. That was it.
That's fine. There's absolutely, I just want to be clear, there is absolutely nothing wrong with using pre-made modules. There's a reason they exist.
In fact, a lot of Twitch shows are doing it too. Using pre-made modules. So.
I've been on, I think pre-made modules are, I've used them. So I ran a series of games for a game store, and I was like, I don't have a lot of time. I don't necessarily know my players. It's players that, like, it's not a dedicated table. So like I was lucky I got a pretty consistent group, but like people would come in and out. A 5-year-old child. I think I've told you about this one. She came along with her dad, and it was super cute. She played a druid, useless character for us because like one battle she just spent the entire time fishing, but she would do this to me the entire time, like.
You know she was feeding her dad your GM notes, right?
Probably. So, because she would do that to whoever she was sitting next to, so eventually I seemed to be the one who was less bothered by her, so I
Yeah.
just put her next to me so she could do that to me. But I used a pre-made module for that because I didn't have a lot of time, but I liked to kind of use it as like a springboard. And so I'd be like, ooh, I like this like encounter that they've got
Yeah.
built in, but I'm gonna change how they get to the encounter. Because it took a lot of the burden off of me to come up with monsters and encounters and
Yeah.
plot hooks and things like that. Yeah, so I think I want to be clear, if you are, like, that's a really good place to start. If you want to run a session, using pre-made encounters.
I actually thought for a while, I thought about doing, using a pre-made encounter or a pre-made module for the D&D show, but I decided that it would be better to create this show instead. think I made a good
Fishing
call
is
there.
useless. Fishing is not a helpful feature in a combat encounter.
I mean, unless you're fighting very specialized creature.
Yeah.
Sorry, super congested today.
Oh, it's okay.
I should get a lozenge. Hang on.
One good place. I did not use a pre-made module when I stole the Girl Scouts die. I've replaced it with ones I won legitimately from a wedding. So I would say a really good place to start when you're thinking about running a game, if you've never done it before, if you're not sure what to do, is looking at pre-made encounters. And D&D has a crap ton of them because it benefits them to have things to make it easier for people to play their game. But also there are other places that you can get them. There is the Dungeon Masters Guild, where people will post ones that they have created. I think you can get ones over on Roll20. A lot of people who run shows, like a lot of them might post pre-made encounters on Patreon and things like that. So if you know people whose like storytelling you like, that's another good way to look for things, is looking for pre-made encounters. And one of the things that's really cool about pre-mades is you can hack them. Is you can pick and choose what you like from them. You don't have to use them as they are.
And there's a lot of material out there these days too, as far as like it doesn't have to be pre-made from Wizards of the Coast. You mentioned Patreon. There's a lot of stuff on Roll20 that is either free or for sale. Like you can branch out from non-publishing sources, which is pretty cool.
So, I would say when you're starting out, and this is actually kind of segues nicely, the main thing that you need, and especially in D&D, or Shadowrun kind of also falls under this category, but a lot of the time when you are lozenges for when you need more stability than cojones.
Chaosogens.
Chaosogens. Oh.
Law versus...
Yeah. No, I follow it. Lozenges. When will we get encounters authored by me? Is that a thing, people?
Probably.
Oh. Okay. I do actually finally scanned all my Leviathan notes, so I will be putting those up on my Patreon, and with a tiny amount of commentary, because I'm like, I don't remember, this is season 1, what even happened? I think, like, you'll notice that I planned a lot more than ever actually happened. You need a hook. That's what you need. You need your mateys. So you need a hook, essentially. You need a thing for the players to be doing, and a reason for them to be doing it. And that's kind of the core of what you start. Yeah, we need a fish for our players. Back to our fishing. So you need something that they can kind of grasp onto. And in D&D and something like Shadowrun, those are typically going to be the job that they do. But in a lot of ways, it can kind of summarize out to the problem that the players have to solve. And you need to tell them what the problem is and why it is a problem, and therefore why they should solve it. So in the case of most of my notes, I will almost always start with a little section at the top that says the setup. And that is probably the place that I have literally the most detail in my notes, except for maybe in an actual encounter. So for example, this was the setup for the one-shot. Oh, Post-it notes, someone commented, Post-it notes are an integral tool. in GMing. I literally keep Post-it notes in my pencil. This is my GMing pencil case. A ruler. I don't know why I'm showing you this. I have an eraser.
Okay, why do you have a ruler?
In case I need to draw straight lines.
Okay.
It fits in my pencil case, so it seemed like a good place for it to go. It's also metal, so it can, I don't know, it's good stabbing. Little Post-it notes. 5 colors of highlighters, because I color code my notes. I color code them by show, and then pens and pencils, and then big Post-it notes. It's my GMing notebook. Girls gotta have knives. I don't know why I have a ruler. I think I used to draw more detailed maps, but also it's useful.
I would go so far as to say girls gotta have knives. But
Not just knife girls.
yeah.
I
I wasn't dissing the ruler.
Oh,
okay?
and then I have an extra
curious
marker.
why she had it, because the reason wasn't obvious, but it's in her GMing toolkit, so
And then
I
I have
wanted to know why. That's all I wanted to do.
No,
I'm
it's
here
a good
to
question.
learn, okay?
I also have dry erase, which this will come up later when I show some of the other stuff that I carry with me. So I will start with the setup. And in the case of this one, the setup was a young lord has hired you to rescue their beloved from their forced wedding. They're hired by, and then the rescue, and then from. So I have like the 3 names because that's about the maximum number of names that I can plan. And then I write some notes. The rescue has to happen tonight. There's a pre-wedding party happening. Several other failed escape attempts, so they're now in the tallest windowless tower under guard. And then I wrote a couple of notes on the side that they would get paid 100 gold pieces each. And that's it. That's my setup. So that is the first scene. So I have there established what they need to do, why they're going to do it, because they're going to get paid, and what the problems are that the person will tell them. These NPCs weren't even in the session. So I had Leon of Nith, Duke Grandil of Nith, and Baronet Amir Ziam, because I needed the person who was hiring them's name, the person they needed to rescue, and the person they were rescuing them from. And one of them, they never talked to.
But they could have.
They could have. I didn't really expect it, but it's useful to refer to some things by name. So that was the hook for the wedding rescue setup from the one-shot. When I ran the setup for the other campaign, which was the 4-week one, the hook was, and I write this at the top, it's just set up. Elaine approaches the group in a tavern, wants them as an escort, made Baron mad, does not mention documents. 25 gold each / 25 on arrival to Serloon. And then that's it. That's the hook. So that is, it can be pretty simple, but it's basically something that they have a reason to do it, and they are something to do. And D&D leaves you some nice, like, there's a lot of classic things in D&D where, like, they meet someone in a tavern, they go to the place where the jobs are. And Shadowrun, it's the Johnson. So there are certain games where they're very, like, mission focused, that it's a lot easier to set up your hook. In other ones, it is less obvious, but typically will normally come. If you're doing a more directed narrative story, it typically comes from an NPC. So like in Leviathan, I have leveraged Ari's existence to essentially be the person to be like, this is what you need to go do next. To give them that direction when they don't know what their direction is going to be. When they know their direction, then they take off and they do the thing. But when they don't know, I like to have an NPC available to provide some of that direction.
Sinforia, is the background too loud? Because I can turn that down a little bit. I had a couple of people in the Discord saying that it was too loud, or that it was too quiet rather, so I turned it up a little. But if it is now too loud, I will turn it back down.
So did I ask my players about what kind of game they want to have? In the case
It's very distracting.
of In the case of Right Click, for the one shot, I didn't really have much of a time to talk to them about it. I ended up making all of their characters. I asked them like what they wanted to play, who they wanted to play. In terms of the short run for Right Click, they did. We talked a little bit, and more of the emphasis was kind of, I think, just on having some of the same sort of tone and feeling that they'd wanted to have. So the ways that you can set up to make them interested in the goal or quest, some of that comes from the character creation. In D&D, I told them they need to play players that would take jobs. And for whatever reason it is they want to take those jobs, they're players that would take them. Kind of in the same way that if I was running Shadowrun, I would say to the players, you need to be Shadowrunners that take Shadowruns. Otherwise, we are not playing Shadowrun. And I said a sort of a similar thing with Leviathan, like you need to be the sorts of players who would want to do the right thing, who would help people, who maybe aren't concerned about money or loot, except for Thea, obviously. She's an exception to all the rules. So it's about finding. I find a lot of the players accepting the hooks kind of comes from unportioning the character creation. The other piece is that you make sure the job is one that you think reflects the kind of inclinations the players have. I probably wouldn't run I wouldn't give players who are particularly moral or champions of good like an assassination mission. Or I wouldn't, I similarly, I wouldn't give, like, dark and gritty Shadowrunners like, rescue a cat from a tree mission sort of idea. So the job has to fit the players. The job has to fit the characters. And I also try and pick up hooks that I think will interest the players. So a good example from Leviathan Season 2 was the entire storyline with Morva was unanticipated. But the players had an incredibly emotional reaction to the broken AI that I immediately switched the AI from being hostile, which is what my original intention had been, to neutral towards the players and actually actively helpful at times when it was able to be. And then that became something that the players themselves were interested in finding a solution to. And I could tell because of their reactions, because of their investment to that. And so from that, I said, okay, we're going to run, like, the next segment is going to be them solving this problem. And so I try and find the balance of this is something that interests the players, so I'm going to pull on that, and this is something that serves an overall narrative, so I'm going to make this appealing for the players to do. And I've asked them to create characters that are going to fit within the narrative. Yeah, so I like, one of the things you'll see when I, and you'll see these when I post up Leviathan notes or on any of my notes, whenever players say or do things, like there's always space on my sheet that I can write down things that players say that I'm like, that could come up later. So like, this one, I wrote down, horsemonger stolen horses. So we can go through the rest of this episode. This was the first episode of Right Click.
Is it better now? I brought it down 2 notches. Sorry. I don't know.
Listening to the characters, Carl was a good example. Carl became just a thing I could remind them of if they were ever like, this Baron's fine. I could be like, no, but he killed a horse. And they're like, Carl! Yeah. So it's the sorts of things that they say that could come up later. So we had this one, we had this set up, and I had this extra box on the side that was basically the details about the NPC. Because I knew this NPC was going to be escorted, so she was going to be with them for a while. So I was like, I need to know a little bit about her. And I basically wrote who she was, who she was, where she was from, like a couple of quick points about like why she was on the run. And that was the summary, but like enough that I'm like, I know who her personality is. Then, when I think of a session, I think in problems. And this is my biggest tip for unpredictable players, is don't ever think about the solution, because they will not do what you think. They just won't. So I always think in problems, and what is the problem, and I present the problem to the players. And I might have a couple of possible solutions. I would always recommend actually having a couple of possible solutions, because sometimes players get stuck. And if players are like, I don't know, what could we do? Then you can give them information in different ways. So I always have a couple of possible solutions, and but mostly just problems that need to be solved. And it's typically a big overall problem. Like in this case, it was they have to get out of the city. And here are sub-problems to the problem of getting out of the city. And so literally the first episode was get out of the city and traverse part of the journey. And those were the two problems. They had to cover distance and they had to get out. So in the case of getting out of the city, I was like, okay, well, Elaine's wanted. So they're going to have to get her past, like, city guards. They could get out by land. And there's city walls. And then if they go by sea, there are fewer guards, but there will be, she's wanted, so there will be mercenaries that would have seen wanted posters for her. They ended up disguising her, so she did not become the problem. But they stole horses. That became the problem. So on the side, I wrote down that they stole horses. And I was like, they solved all of the problems that I gave them, and then presented themselves a new problem for getting out of the city, which was, okay, cool, they disguised her. They were going to take horses out. I was like, great, you got this. Never mind.
Yeah, and then they decided not to pay for the horses.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, they stole the horses, so the guards are going to give them a hard time at the gate. And in all the horse stealing, I forgot she was wanted in the first place. Yeah, and so they solved problem A, but made themselves problem B. And so that's a good example of, like, I did not in any way anticipate that the way they would get horses was to steal them. I was like, I'm giving them plenty of money. They'll buy the horses, or they'll rent the horses from Hertz Rent-A-Horse. And they ended up not doing either. They didn't do either of those two things. So it meant that there was a new problem and their actions had a consequence. But they solved their original problem, which was Elaine looking like herself. And so that's a good example of an unpredictable way of solving a problem that I did not anticipate they would do. But because all I had planned was what their actual thing, the actual thing they needed to solve was, and not the way they would do it, meant that I was totally okay to roll with whatever they had done. I still gave them, they still had a challenge, they still had something that they had to do. So Bora's question, what do you do when they're just stuck? When the players don't know what to do next? I always leverage that I can tell players what their characters would know. So the example of that would be, like, your character, like, Kiko would know that this ship looks like it's constructed in this way, and there would be pipes going in this direction. So if they are stuck with finding a solution to a problem, I will remind them of things that their characters would know. Because again, it comes to that piece of, like, they are not actually living as their characters, so it's harder for them. Like, they're doing double work. Like, they're playing a part, they're jumping into someone's skin, like, So breadcrumbs, essentially. I like put down little clues, little reminders that can get them to a potential solution to the problem. So like in this case, I would have said, like you've seen wanted posters with Elaine's face on it.
Do you have any tips for finding those crumbs to give them, though? Do you have any, like, ideas for, like, any rules that you use for like, this person's going to know this thing?
Sometimes you can ask them, rolling is always a useful tool, because you can just ask them to, like, make rolls, whether you use... I normally use the result as kind of a scale as opposed to like a blank yes or no. Like if they roll really high, I can give them a little bit more. I try in that case to think about like what are the core skills of the player. So like in Leviathan is a good example. Like Kika's the fixer, Thea's the stealer, Rachel's the connected, Conrad's the soldier, and Ziana's the leader. Like, and so what are things that they would know as their core of who they are? Mm-hmm. And I can give them kind of information based on that. Like Ziana is more likely to notice something about like someone's like fighting prowess, like how they're fighting, their fighting style, like measuring up an opponent. Conrad is probably more likely to know things about like administration, rules, laws, anything to do with the core of the system. He would also know about drugs and Space Mountain Dew. I'm so excited. Kika would know anything about like ships and mechanics. Thea would know about black market stuff, and Rachel would know about like people and interacting with them. So
basically, if you have an idea for a breadcrumb that you can feed them, you could stop and say, okay, what does this relate to? Mm-hmm. Whose primary skills or knowledge base would it fall best in?
So you can tailor the breadcrumbs to the character, because that's also a good way for them to feel like their character is useful as part of the group. And not always. Sometimes it can just be like, everybody would know this, like it's general knowledge. Sometimes you can ask, like, what are they currently doing? And so, like, or where they are in a room. Like, especially if you have, like, positional clues, like, oh, there's something on the ceiling or something on the floor, there's a trap. Like, you can ask where people are in the room, and this person who's closest to it is the one that's going to get the breadcrumb. But that's why I always recommend, if you have a problem, have some of your own potential solutions to the problem, or sort of sub problems. Because, like, in this case, if I was just like, you just need to leave the city, and I didn't have any sub-problems, then they would just be like, well, we leave. And I'd be like, I guess you do. And that was easy, and that wasn't a challenge. Yeah. But I can be like, sub-problems are, people know who she looks like, they want it, like, there's a wanted on her head. And there are guards, and if it's not guards, there are mercenaries. And so these are some potential problems, and then if someone's like, oh, I still don't know what to do, I would probably have looked at Megan's character, who is the bard, and been like, well, you have a disguise kit that you could use to disguise her and, like, kind of feed it in that sort of way. And I think I was like, exactly, Pumpkin. We can't identify people wearing glitter. You have a bag of holding of glitter.
It's like camouflage for guards.
Yeah.
Or agents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Makeover montage. Yep. So that is one of the ways of breadcrumbing. Or some systems have knowledge skills. And that's, it depends on the system. Shadowrun has, like, very specific ones. Stars Without Number has more generic ones, but D&D has a bunch of knowledge, like wisdom and intelligence skills, and those are good ways of judging for D&D in particular. Like, do people know this? Like, sometimes if I just want them to know something, I'd be like, who has the highest nature? And, like, I could have done that when they were fighting the thing, and I was like, at some point I want them to be constantly worried, so I'm not going to tell them. But you could just ask, like, who is proficient in nature, and then give that person the information.
Sorry, I just realized I never hosted the channel.
Oh God, I didn't either.
Here I am asking for other people to host and share, and then I didn't do it myself. So, hey, gonna host the stream.
How do druids feel about glitter? Glitter can be totally natural. It could just be made of quartz and mica. You could get natural glitter. It's basically what we use in like face powder.
I mean, glitter came from somewhere.
Yeah.
And it was stuff like that. Quartz, mica. Mica is very glittery.
How do I host the stream? Anna Geeks is hosting.
Hey,
Weird.
go me. For remembering that halfway through our show.
It's okay. I'm doing it now. It's fine. I wish you could like prioritize auto hosts in such a way.
I wish you could schedule them. Flat out schedule them.
That would be great.
Right?
That would be great. Iron filings.
Ow.
Pirate.
No, that would get slivers,
gold.
iron slivers. No, they're not good. I know, how nice of me to host the show that I'm on.
Oh, look at that. Random Tuesday is hosting.
Thanks.
Weird.
Yeah. So strange.
Mm.
So besides breadcrumbs, would players is stuck is often useful to ask the players to summarize the situation as they remember it. And it allows you to see if they've forgotten anything important or if they have any misunderstanding, but also sometimes them summarizing will give them new ideas. Well said.
I'm glad Washmatic is reading the Wikipedia page about glitter. Yes, definitely to reiterate what Trooper said, asking players to summarize things, to also say things, one, can give them some agency. I always encourage, and this actually was a really interesting habit that I had to get out of. So in improv, you generally don't ask questions. It is typically one of the early rules that you learn is just don't ask questions. And then over time you can figure out how to improvise and ask questions. But what you're doing in improv is putting the burden on someone else to come up with the idea, and that's not what you want to go for. So I had to teach myself as a GM to ask my players questions. Because I would be like, I have to know everything. I can't ask them questions ever, because then I'm being a bad improviser.
And thank you everyone else that has hosted the stream as well, no matter how many or how few viewers. It is greatly appreciated, and it does help. Believe it or not, it does help. Even if it's 0, it still helps.
Metrics are good. Metrics are good. Metrics. Similar to what Trooper was saying about getting them to summarize, you can also ask them questions of like, what does your character do? Where are they in a room? What are they looking at? Like, what are they looking for? And like oftentimes if a player's like, I just want to roll perception, I'll be like, well, what are you looking for? And perception is almost always one of those that I very rarely use as like a pure yes or no. And when they fail, I normally like to mislead them. Be like, this is what you hear instead. Or like, and kind of, but I like to phrase it often in like, especially if they're using it to like look around a room for clues, like, what are you looking for? And I think that's an important tool to be able to ask your parents questions.
Also an important
Players
tool.
questions.
Also very important.
Also important to be able to ask your parents questions.
Communication is good.
But being able to ask your players questions about what they're doing, how they're approaching things, what are they looking for, things like that can help you with leaving your breadcrumbs. So that's the basic concept. So when I laid out this first episode, I essentially put it as they have 3 problems. They've got 2 problems and a setup. They've got the setup, they've got to get out of the city, and then they've got to travel. And because I didn't know how they were going to leave the city, I didn't necessarily know what problems they were going to face when they were traveling. And so the way I ended up writing that out was, well, they're going to get out of the city. Here are the issues with getting out of the city. And they're going to traverse somewhere. So if they travel by land, here's one problem that they face. And if they travel by sea, here is the problem. Which was literally, land was charging elk will tip a vehicle, and there will be 3 dire wolves, which is the one they ended up facing. Fun fact, if they had gone by sea, they would have faced a giant octopus trying to sink their ship and 2 quipper swarms.
clipper swarms?
Quipper.
Quipper.
Quipper. I think they're piranhas.
Oh. And now we're back to fishing.
Yes. Krellin, yes. So that is essentially, and I actually wrote here that it was optional because I was like, I have no idea how long it's going to take them to get out of the city. So I always have a little bit extra in case I need it, and I was like, here's my little bit extra. Like,
so you basically have like, so why did you choose the wolves instead of the elk tipping the?
Oh, it did. So the elk ran out, surprised them.
Got
and
it.
then the
so
wolves
it wasn't
attacked.
that it was an either or, it was that it was both.
Yeah.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, no. So situation one is essentially, I was like, they could just try and run away from the elves, but I'm like, nah. They're gonna get surprised by a giant elk running through the trees from 3 direwolves. Because I find that amusing. It's like the horses are going to get spooked. They're going to have to get... So even if they chose not to fight, there would be some things they'd have to do. They'd have to get their horses back under control. Yeah. Maybe one of them would bolt. Depending on how they react to the wolves. But I always try and, like, especially D&D, it's built around combat in a lot of ways. And a lot of player powers and abilities are around combat. So going one session without combat is normally fine. Going several sessions without combat can get kind of boring as a D&D player. Because you're like, man, all of these sweet things I have on my character sheet that I haven't gotten to use.
Yeah, like a solid half of the classes are only useful in combat, or specifically all of their unique powers are related to combat. So, yeah.
So D&D normally has a solid like classic try structure, or 3 things is puzzle, a fight, and a social encounter. And while I wouldn't necessarily do all of those in every episode, I normally try and have some balance of them, especially knowing I've got a bard, so there should be some social stuff. I've got a barbarian, so they should get a chance to murder some stuff. I've got a monk, so there should probably be some sneaking, because she built a sneaky monk, but also some murdering. And then there's a wizard, so there should probably be some things that can be solved by weird spells, but also some murder. So they're like... There is an impetus when you are doing D&D to put more combat in. So you'll like the planning behind stuff like right click is I'll normally like to have a couple of just like 2 monsters that I can throw in for an encounter, and like the elk dashing out and the 3 direwolves, or an octopus just grabbing onto the ship, and then these quipper storms in the water. Being something. And like in that situation there would have been things like you gotta make some checks because the octopus is just going to be trying to tip the boat. So like, do you have to stay on? You've got to make some checks to stay on. What happens when you fall in the water? Does it like you're gonna get swarmed? Like, do these things eat you? Do you have to get into the water to attack the octopus? Stuff like that. And some games don't have any combat in them. So this is specific to D&D. In those games, you're going to plan, your problems are going to look different. They're not going to be the... They're going to be less what monsters are they going to be facing, and more something else.
Yeah, and then you have players that decide to talk instead of murder the intended fight encounter.
So one of the things that I will...
But, to be fair, that was their choice. And so even though barbarians are geared for fighting, we saw her being one of the more compassionate and being like, no, I don't want to fight them. So, yeah. But the option was still there. Ages.
So I always try, and in D&D to... Sometimes I'll throw in fights that don't really mean anything. Like the wolves ended up delightful because they took the wolves and they pelted them, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
But it was fundamentally just 3 wolves attacking them, and like they just needed to survive the fight.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's okay because again, in a system like D&D where often the cool parts of your characters are things that you get to do in a fight, often the trick in that place is to, even if there's no conflicts, one of your NPCs will be a monster.
I read that as PCs, and I'm like,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. One of the things you can do is make fights interesting in a different way. Set up things that are not just I have to hit it and I have to succeed in hitting it. Like you're on horses, you have to keep your horses calm. You're in like a narrow space, like the geography of your fight is weird. There's other stuff going on.
And my guess is, so I was just sitting here thinking, well, how did you come up with the idea of wolves? And thinking, do you have like a random spreadsheet that lists a whole bunch of encounters? And I'm like, even if she doesn't, that's a thing that exists on the internet, I'm sure, where you could just go and find basically a random encounter table, pick something that suits the situation that you're looking for an event for, and then write the rest of it around that too.
So typically, often the way I design I'll pick a D&D encounter is I think about the terrain and then therefore what creature would be there. And the monster manual is actually really helpful because they have, it's either the monster manual or the DM's guide, but in one of the two, they have essentially list the monsters by the terrain that they would show up in.
Random encounter tables.
It's not even random. It's literally they list them by challenge level and terrain.
Yes,
and
I'm thinking
the concept, yes,
because I, haven't GM'd in decades. So back in my day, we had to roll dice to figure out what the players would encounter.
And so I like to, that's one of the approaches that I do. The other thing that I'll do is I like to chimera things in the monster manual a lot, or like reskin. So in the very first episode, our one shot of Right Click, I was like, there's going to be a guard, but it's not going to be a human guard because we've dealt with human guards already. I wanted like a construct, like a Warforged sort of idea, and I was like, but they don't really have that in the book. That was the right challenge rating. So I was like, I took the stats for animated armor and then the stats for something else, and I like mushed them together. And so I made something that was like the right challenge rating. So then it was like, oh, there's this suit of armor that will try and defend this room. And they ended up not fighting it, sort of. And so we ended up with a very strange one-on-one fight with a monk that would not have been able to defeat it on its own, but she was like, oh, I'm going to try all these clever things to stop it from being able to fight me back. And I was like, done. That'll work. So the other thing, too, is when I had like this 3 wolves encounter, I was like, that's assuming we face the whole party. You can always scale up and down encounters really easily in D&D by dumping fewer monsters or more monsters at them. Machine counters, sometimes they need to bake longer. That is true.
Now we're back to baking. And I'm feeling bad that I didn't get to bake today. I don't have internet in my apartment, and normally Wednesday mornings I do a baking stream, and then I bring baked goods here, but I couldn't do a baking stream because I don't have internet at my apartment. So, yeah. So there you go.
So to answer your question, Iffy, in terms of...
And now I want a cupcake.
No, it's fine. In terms of prepping stuff beforehand, because I never know for sure if a fight's gonna happen, I tend not to overbuild monsters because it's a lot that becomes wasted work. So I will tend to use monsters as they are in the monster manual unless it's a boss fight. In which case, then I will be like, I'm gonna make something because this is a boss and it's gonna happen. But I don't like to waste too much of the effort. It was the same in Shadowrun, it's the same with Stars Without Number. I use the table because in a lot of systems, like, fights are short whenever I run them for some reason. They don't last very long. So I normally am like, this is their AC. This is how much damage they do. And this is the one cool thing that they can do. And they might get to do it like a couple times in the combat. And the cool thing is like what sets them apart. And therefore, that's the thing that I can kind of change up and make them a little bit different. So in Shadowrun, it'd be like, what is the spell that the mage has? What is the cool spell this mage has? Which would normally be whatever spell Dan had taken most recently, because fuck it. He's like, I found this cool spell, it fucks with you. And I'm like, I now have this cool spell, too.
So, yes, Pistrius would be disappointed. Pistrius should talk to whatever deity controls intranet at my apartment.
Intranetius?
Probably Ping, actually.
Oh. Oh, no.
It's my cat's name, in case you didn't know, one of my cats. And then I'm sure there's a bakery somewhere in Seattle. Yes, but probably not one that can cater to all of my eating issues. I did think about stopping at the cupcake place and buying you a cupcake, but I'm like, nah, she'll be here Friday.
I'll be fine. Good.
Because I'm probably going to
Friday.
bake tomorrow, just off
Good.
camera. And no, you can't actually, if you're a broadcaster, bake without streaming it on a day that you're supposed to be streaming because you have no free time whatsoever. And then I could have just taken action shots. Yeah, but I missed my stream on Monday, so I didn't want to take that off. And then the one that made me stop and want to cover all of these is Doten saying, what I'm hearing is there should be a better kitchen at the studio. There should be any kitchen at the studio. I would love for us to have a kitchen at the studio because I want to do a baking show on this channel, not with me as the host. I know who I want as the host, and I've already talked to them about it, and they have already expressed
She's
interest
really
in doing
cool.
it. But we don't have a kitchen here that we can stream from, so we just need to survive in this space long enough to get
Fun
a better
fact.
space.
Kenna was wearing a branded apron that belonged to that person, but I don't think you ever saw the brand on stream.
Spoilers. It's fine.
I don't think it showed.
People don't know whose apron that was.
I have no idea.
Wasn't one of mine. So anyway, I just wanted to cover all of that. That yes, I would love it if we had a kitchen here that we could bake at, because I would totally do have a cooking show on this here channel.
That'd be pretty great.
Right?
No.
It's all right.
We also have 2 professional chefs on various of our shows, or people who have worked professionally in kitchens.
All things in success. Anyway.
Someone had a comment or a question. Oh, what do I mean by wasted work? If I take all of the time it takes to meticulously build the stat block of a monster that they never use in a campaign, like that was time that I could have spent doing something else. And sure, like I can put it in my back pocket and use it for something else, but typically if I need something that specific that it doesn't already exist in the monster manual, it's filling a very specific niche. And that's wasted work. Because it probably won't apply again in some other system or setting. So that's what I mean. Like if I go through as opposed to the very, like a surface level reskinning where I have like a fun, cool concept that I can, that if it never comes up, I can like put that away. But like that was less mechanic works. Yeah, in terms of, I tend to err on the side of under-planning monsters and enemies as opposed to over-planning them, but that's because I'm very comfortable with flipping to the right page in the monster manual or looking at a table and running a fight with very little information. When I started Shadowrun, that was not the case. I meticulously built stat blocks for every single guard that they faced, and then I was like, oh my god, they're all the same. Why am I caring what weapon they're wielding? No one's asked me what weapon this is. I can just say it does this much damage. So I stopped doing that. But that's where comfort really does come in.
Pumpkin, that would be a great question for Wind Down on Friday at 8 p.m. Pacific.
Oh, that is a good question. But again, a lot of what Trooper is saying is very true, and I want to point out that I am referring to combat a lot because that tends to be a component of D&D campaigns, but is not a requirement. Is that combat is not the only type of encounters that you're going to face. Like, the getting out of the city was 100% not intended to be a combat encounter. I had stats for guards just in case they decided their solution was to punch their way out. But the assumption was that they're probably not going to fight their way out. They're going to sneak, they're going to disguise, they're going to do something else to get their way out of the city, as opposed to necessarily fighting, but it was still a risk. Similarly, later on, the whole second episode where they were facing the Battle of the Bands, no part of that did I plan for it to be a fight. I didn't even have stats for them. I just knew what classes they were so that I could be like, if it gets into some sort of fight, I can have one of them sling some spells. But it was basically, you'll notice, like, episode 1 is a full page. Episode 2 was half a page because it was challenge. They're gonna challenge them to a song. That was it. There was another band will trash talk them at breakfast. Yeah, so it was a small town, about 5 days' ride. Honora's gone. Another band will trash talk them at breakfast. It will be any key. And originally they were going to challenge them for their spot in the festival, but then they just got mad, so they just challenged them anyway. And that was it. That was the entire episode. And then there was going to be the ambush, which I'd already planned. What about the monster's appearance? An interesting feature. Sometimes that's a personal preference. Sometimes I will describe them. I think it depends on how significant I think they will be, because I know that the more effort I put in, the more likely they are to latch on or just murder them outright. It's hard to tell. So I will vary on the amount of effort that I put into describing a character. And that is something we can talk about with NPCs, because there's a person who's lying down, chilling out right now, who I want to talk more about NPCs at some point, because she's very good at making them.
She has earphones in right now, though, so
yeah,
she can't actually hear us.
Did you have your question?
No, at some point I want you to talk about building NPCs.
On this show.
On this show.
Oh, okay. Like now?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Everybody says hi. Yeah, not today. Just
No,
in general.
no, just in general.
Go back to your now.
Or your girls. Or your boys.
Do you want a pillow?
Yeah. I'm on the floor and not be a distraction.
Aw, there's a chair there, you know.
I don't want that.
Okay, just making sure.
4 times.
Guys, Leviathan's back tonight.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I have to go back and pick up the costume that I made because I left it.
Oops.
Disappointing. I know.
Oops.
I like to, so you were saying running stat blocks are easy, so I don't have to create NPCs if I don't want to. Yeah, so GURPS is a good example of that. I found D&D I find that harder to do because there's more specifics to it, especially like if you want spells. That's where I would recommend cheat sheets potentially. So Shadowrun was a good example where I made cheat sheets. So I made like pre-gen stat blocks, which was like easy, medium, hard. And then I had like a list of spells that were like, here are spells that might come up frequently. And so then I could kind of mix and match.
And I think that there's a good time for, at least with D&D, they've released the spell decks.
Mm-hmm.
Those can be really, really handy because you know what spells are going to come up frequently. You can have the cards sitting there. So.
And there are online generators for a lot of that stuff
Sure.
too,
Yeah.
where you can
D&D Beyond.
where you can kind of build stuff on the fly. Stars Without Number is actually really easy to do on the fly. There's literally, they give you a table. And it's half a page, and that covers pretty much any type of enemy that you would want them to face. And I basically went through the book and just like cropped all of the tables out and put them all on one sheet of paper. So I was like, I have my 1-page NPC generator. And then if you want to like get fancy, you can be like, oh, what's their weapon? And then you can go to the weapon table, and like that's how I plug and play on that one. So I find, if you find systems where you can improvise stat blocks, and that often is a system you are familiar with, like that's the easiest thing, then you can, you'll be more comfortable with doing things on the fly, and that's where you want to be if you have players that are unpredictable in their choices. One of the other things then you can do is you can plug and play too. So, like, the original plan had been that they were, the first episode, they were going to, there was going to be this ambush at some point, and I wasn't sure how long these things would take. And so that ambush was a thing that I knew they were going to experience on the road with right click, and I just had it, and it was like, this will fit in wherever it needs to fit in, which was at the end of an episode because someone needs to get kidnapped. And that was the solution to that problem. And so like this unit exists separate from the plot story as a thing that does actually need to happen because it's a narrative beat. It's a hook. And so finding narrative beats that you can move around is also a helpful strategy. Being able to shift and move pieces in a story so you can fit things in. And that works both for long-term plot and shorter-term plot. Has anyone ever had predictable players? No. I don't think I have.
I'll go with no. That seems safest.
Most likely.
Yeah.
I think I've done a lot of talking. So let's go to questions.
Yeah.
So I can talk more, but
Differently.
differently. I didn't use the whiteboard.
Gosh darn it! You know what?
What?
I'm sorry. I just realized that once again I forgot to I did this last week too. I forgot to factor this show into this week's goals. It's fine. It's fine.
You could go update the goals.
I might. We'll see. It's fine. So anyway, sorry. Anybody got questions? Questions in chat? Questions? We didn't. I don't remember if I mentioned this on screen. Obviously I told you we didn't end up able to do the session 0 for the D&D show this past weekend. So yeah, we just couldn't do it this past weekend. Arya has been pretty sick, and so we decided to not contaminate the rest of the cast and I told her to stay home. So that's why we're kind of stalled with all of that at the moment. But yeah, there you go. Ooh, when something goes off the rails, would rewatching the VOD become mandatory for the GM?
I think I'm guessing your question is about because I write notes prior, which means that my notes don't necessarily line up with what happened. I have maybe in my life, since I have been GMing on Twitch, rewatched a maximum of a total of 4 hours worth of content that I have actually I don't rewatch it because it stresses me out.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I would spend, it's not a thing that I want to deal with.
I think that's a pretty common feeling for a lot of broadcasters. I won't rewatch my own stuff.
Yeah. I'll watch clips. I rewatched part of the end of Leviathan just because I literally needed to know exactly where I left off. Misaki, thank you for that $10 donation. I've been catching up on all of the GeekSpaceTV content, and I'm loving every minute.
Yay.
It's not much, but every little bit helps.
That's true. That is very true. We very much are hoping to long-term build a channel based around that amount of money per person, yeah.
That
helps a huge amount.
We've talked about this, that the goal is more people, small amounts, because that is long-term more sustainable.
Yep.
I think it's also a similar goal with in terms of viewers too. People shouldn't feel like they have to watch every show because it's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. You should watch what you enjoy.
And Conrath said, "When more Shadowrun?"
We've had
someday.
Someday. We've actually talked about this.
Yeah. I love Shadowrun. Shadowrun is part of the reason that I live in Seattle now. That's yeah. So maybe someday.
Maybe someday. I've talked about I do genuinely I liked Cyberpunk. There was a reason I said yes to running a Shadowrun game in the first place, and it wasn't because I was I don't even fucking know what Twitch is. I ran it because I was I like Shadowrun. Yes, I will go read this wiki. The real question is what time? When time, Leviathan?
When time, Leviathan? Yes, I believe whenisleviathan.com is probably a thing that somebody will make. I personally am not going to spend the money on the .com address. Sorry.
What?
It could be
Leviathan time dot what?
.stream.
Dot
when
stream.
is Leviathan.stream would work. Or when is Leviathans.stream would work, because you can probably get it for 99 cents at namecheap.com. That's where I got all those URLs when my name was awful. Anyway, in success, all things are possible. Pretty much, yeah.
Is that a question or a statement?
It was a question that we could then easily agree with.
That's true.
Yeah.
Sorry, someone had asked about... I'm going to scroll up slightly because we got interrupted.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Every time.
Sorry, here.
I don't know how your monitors are all connected.
I know.
Rewatching the VOD we were talking about, and I never finished that. So I don't tend to rewatch it, but the important piece is to make sure that you are listening to what your players are doing and you're making notes that help you make sense of it. So, I have crossed out things in notes, like when players don't do them, or check off stuff that do happen. Like here, I crossed out what the challenge was because it was no longer relevant. And so I try and take notes of what is actually happening in a session. But because typically I also plan by problem, the problems generally happen. They normally don't solve a problem before it comes up, so the problem still happened. So what I tend to write down is what their solution to the problem was, because that's the thing that I have to remember, and that's the thing that would be important for future things, for future episodes or future stories. So if you don't feel like you took good enough notes, then awesome. If you're on Twitch, you can go rewatch your VODs. But you can also ask your players what happened in the previous episodes, because it is a collaborative experience, and there were more than one of you there. I don't know how big your group is.
A little bit before, Sinforia also asked about them skipping entire massive portions through finding a loophole.
What I tend to recommend in that case is, one, think about potential problems that the biggest suggestion is, what are potential problems that could have come out of the solution that they found? So they found, in some ways, a loophole to buying horses, which was taking horses from someone who was enthralled, who were then going to realize that they had given their horses away to someone who used magic on them. Meaning that person was going to be like, you stole my horses. And so then there's a new problem out of their solution that came up. Sometimes it's also okay, which is again why I tend to, because it helps that I think about a story arc from beginning, middle to end, which tends to span over more than one session of play. I can just jump to the next material, which unfortunately may mean the following week I have to do more planning because we had to cut some stuff. But it does also mean that I have material there. Or you punish them vigorously. Yes. With their vigorous
Yeah,
skills.
I was going to say, that is when you use vigorous, apparently.
I don't know if Claudia was grunting because of what we were saying or because of what's happening in her game. So again, there is creative problem solving, but that doesn't mean it solves all their problems.
Yeah. It can cause as many or more even problems than it solves, potentially.
I really need to take a look at Mouse Guard. I've heard very good things about it.
Yeah,
I actually
me too.
looked at a little bits of it when I was prepping some stuff for how I'm going to be running Leviathan. How do I feel about the ultimate cheat sheet, Stone to Earth? I feel like there's a reference I'm missing.
Is Stone to Earth an ultimate cheat?
I don't know either. Oh, are you talking about the meteor crashing down and murdering everyone? That's always a go-to. That's always my example of like why an RPG is not a game that can be won when you have a storyteller, or even if it's a collaborative game, because like fundamentally you can be like, a meteor crashes down and kills everyone, rocks fall, everyone dies, and like that is an example of the ultimate power the GM has and why it can't be a competitive thing fundamentally, because the GM has a disproportionate amount of power. It makes more sense now. Rocks fall, everyone dies. And obviously different methods of play can change that balance of power. If you are sticking to very true like gamist, going by all of the rules, then there is potentially more of a competitive element to it.
I keep wanting to delve into stuff that we should talk about during Wind Down. Like, because now everybody's talking about Mouse Guard, and in my stream earlier we were talking about Pugmire and the Monarchies of Mao, which is Pugmire but with cats, and so like talking about Mouse Guard, and I'm just like, yes, I want to do all of these things at some point, and like wanting to have that conversation right now, but that's a Wind Down conversation, not a behind the screens one. I want to do all the things. All the things. It's fine.
You got this. An otter-based RPG? That sounds utterly amazing.
Would it be in space?
Otters in space?
Yeah, otter space.
Oh my god, I need alien otters.
I am sorry that I only just now said that phrase in front of you and didn't do it sooner.
Are you saying, it's a low level and powerful, dungeon walls equal, dirt door, can't get to the next level, dirt floor ceiling, hard to see how either make the ceiling fall on them. Fun fact, Evie, I had a player with the dig spell in 4th edition. Claudia's laughing because she remembers this episode. And I hated that spell because you basically dig a pit in the ground and then the spell pulls everything to the pit and dumps them in it, and then you have a bunch of people like wailing down firebells in a pit.
Oh, that's not what I thought you were going to remember the pit for.
No, but this is why I hated the pit.
Oh.
And so I had to like have NPCs that could fly or teleport or do things to get out of the pit. So I built an entire session about not being able to use the dig spell because I hated that much, which was it took place in a volcano. So if at any point the player used the dig spell, they would trigger a volcanic eruption.
I thought we used the
Wait.
dig spell to break mazes because we just said
You
dig.
did, but then it triggered.
Horizontal.
But I was like, you're in a labyrinth in a volcano caldera, which means if you use the dig spell to solve this problem, you will trigger a volcanic eruption, and you may not be able to get out if you do that. So they eventually used it right at the very end.
Minotaur.
I would
scary.
say
It was
that you
Minotaur and it was scary, and they couldn't solve the labyrinth.
You can also cause structural issues, like, oh, hey, that wall right there was a support wall. These other ones,
Yeah.
not as strong. Oops.
And that's what
now
I-
you've caused a cave-in. Dig spell's not going to cover that unless you want to move 10 feet a day, in which case you're going to have other issues.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So,
So that's what that is a much less roundabout way than my example is, that just because they use a spell that seems powerful doesn't mean there can't be consequences to it.
Yeah.
Just because you climb into the heart of the evil alien monster doesn't mean it might not have problematic interiors.
yeah. And now we've got everybody talking about spotters. And let me just say, if I ever guest on Leviathan, totally
Play a
going to be a
spotter.
spotter. An NPC spotter, and I'll be like, nah, you're all in outer space now. We've driven Claudia out. With the spuds.
Yeah, I mean that's a very antagonistic way to put it, Iffy, but it is kind of true that being a DM is about creatively sabotaging player solutions. Being a GM is about finding the right balance between saying yes, you found a solution, and your solution caused another problem.
Also known as a scout, yes, Krellin. That's how, the Batlath is traveling and they enter outer space, right? And a scout is going to approach them and be like, whoa, Ica folks, you're in outer space now.
Like, you say this, and it's become canon. Like, they exist. There is
Yeah.
an area that
known
is
as
outer space. Because and like what you were saying, sometimes
Claudia is giving. Don't worry, Claudia. They'll be taller than you.
sometimes it is finding the right balance between rewarding creative solutions and ensuring that there is enough problems that they don't feel like they just get away with everything. Like, this is coming up because of the whole loopholes. Like, they blast through it, like they solve a dungeon with one spell, and that is not always a problem, but sometimes you still want there to be a challenge. So like sometimes you're like, cool, you got through that one door. But if they're like, oh, we're gonna blast through this entire maze using the same strategy, at some point that strategy is gonna stop working. Because otherwise the challenge becomes less interesting. And maybe it's even just like, yeah, it works, but like the tremors cause the creatures that lurk in these caves to come towards you, and so now you're surrounded by hordes of purple worms.
How to win D&D. Thank you for that $5.01. Thank you for sharing your tips on how to win D&D. You're welcome.
The only way to
Thank
win
you very, very
is
much
to
for
not
that.
play.
No.
Oh, wait, yes?
No.
Play.
The only way to win is to play and have fun. Or something. Similar.
I think when you phrase what you're doing as punishing your players, that's building a different relationship. Trooper's way of saying it's reactions. Yeah, I look at it more as there are consequences towards actions, and those are reactions. Like what a player does is going to affect the world around them, and sometimes it'll affect it positively, and sometimes it'll affect or to their benefit, and sometimes it'll affect them not to their benefit, to their detriment. And so finding the right balance of when there is success and when there is partial success and when there is abject failure. The only way, having fun is the only way to win, but if you're only having fun when you win, so it is, and it is also going to be variable based on your players. I tend not to use the same. I know the GM will start to find a way from stop me. That's pretty normal. If you're like, I'm going to solve all my problems in the same way, I'm going to be like, it's not going to work all the time in the same way. I do like making it unpredictable, though, so they're like, I'm going to try it this time, and I'm like, not this time, but next time it might still work. Maybe. Or work in a unexpected way. That's always another option.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here like, oh, no, there's another way to deal with that. Oh, no, there's another way. There's, okay. No. Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, that wall happened to have a rat's nest. Mm-hmm. Roll initiative. Mm-hmm. Pumpkin, thank you for that $14.28. How to make friends and watch entertaining shows. Subtitled, go to GeekSpaceTV. Aw, thank you.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Other questions?
We've got about 20 minutes left of today's episode. Thank you all very, very much for hanging out with us.
Yeah. It'll work, but with side effects. I always... Success with consequences is probably one of my favorite things to do. Because Claudia's either nodding because she's listening to me or nodding because of her music. Because of me. I like success with consequences. I like players being able to succeed, but I like everything not going exactly the way they want it to go. Because that is very satisfying for my end. It, I think, creates... they have... Sometimes... they just do things in such an entirely unexpected way. Like, the goblins, I think, are a really good example of this. They talked their way through that encounter. They ended up with these goblin allies, which, on the flip side, meant I had to upscale a couple of the coming encounters. I was like, I'll just throw in another giant spider. But it also meant they got to watch these goblins get murdered because they put these goblins into situations they were not prepared for. And so there's, like, the weird consequence of, like, how do they feel about the part where they were like, yeah, no, we'll just bring these goblins along for a ride they are unprepared for. There's so many goblins died. I like Boss Man.
Boss Man was pretty amazing.
He ended up with like 23 hit points at the end of it. It was so many for a goblin.
23 bonus hit points, if I remember right. Yeah, the goblins were pretty great. That was a wonderfully done.
Mm-hmm. So that's
on all points.
So I can explain that one was the final part of the episode when I wrote it down. I had written the cave, which was that they would arrive and like what they would see, and then I wrote the goblins, which is a group of 6 goblins will come attack. But I wrote 3 points. This was their home. The mercs chased them out. And then I actually had a third note that I didn't end up bringing up because they didn't figure things out, which was that the bullet attacked the mercs and scared them off. So because of the way they encountered the goblins, they didn't go to the site first. They ended up finding the goblins first. I was like, oh, okay. Instead of the goblins surprising them, they're going to sneak up on the goblins. I just like the goblins will attack, but I was like, that's always a question mark. There will be goblins. How they solve the problem of these goblins wanting to attack them is up to them. And they persuaded them. And I was like, what are things goblins like? They like money. They like shiny things. They don't actually know what money is. They like stuff. And they like feeling important. And so that was like, okay, they spoke to those things that I decided like made up the core of the personality of the goblins. And therefore, the goblins agreed to go with them. And so that entire encounter was just 6 goblins will want to attack them. And I think at that point I was prepared enough that they might not fight the goblins.
And I mean, especially with that group too, there's the very real possibility of, like, even with the dire wolves, I mean, they tried to do animal handling first, even with the dire wolves, and if they had rolled a nat 20, I bet it would have worked. So
I mean, I ran an entire campaign, one shot by accident, which was the one for the Girl Scouts where I got the die from. That they also had to fight these dire wolves, but the wolves had been like corrupted by an evil dryad, and they kind of figured that out. And like playing with kids, I was like, oh, you have to lead them a lot more. You have to be like, oh, look, you can see the evil being, yeah. But all they wanted to do was tame the wolves, and I was like, okay. Like, they didn't end up killing them. They got pet wolves out of it. And I was like, but sure.
Evie, thank you very, very much for that donation. $9.79, getting the number as right as I can make it. Thank you very much.
I can only guess what the number is now.
Yeah. My guess is it's
6969?
No, because I think it was Krellin earlier was saying that they wish they could donate $20 and some change. So now I'm like, all right, it's ending in .69, but my guess is it's like 5869 or something like that.
Oh, nope, it's 6969.
Oh, it is? All right. Oh, my bad.
Maybe Krellin just wanted to bypass it, so it couldn't happen.
Maybe. No, there's the other one. There's the one from my channel, which would be 8008. Yeah. Yeah. See, and Krellin's like, yeah, the full admiral,
Boobs?
as we call it. No, just one.
Oh, boob.
Yeah. Boobs is like $800
Oh,
and
yeah.
85
No, that's
cents.
fair.
We're
That's
not
hard.
gonna hit that
That's
for
hard.
a long
Just
time.
one boob.
It's fine. Yeah, just one.
One boob.
So they get one dancing blue-footed booby on the screen. Not actually. No, that's later when we hit. Anyway, it's
That's
fine.
lovely. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
So
I'm glad we're both really mature.
True,
Straight
right?
communities.
Oh,
Super,
yeah.
super mature.
Yeah.
I don't feel as bad now.
MLG Pro Adult. That's something else entirely. Trooper was asking, do you have a sense of how unpredictable your players might be? No. And let me explain why. You can't possibly comprehend the amount of chaos that players can get up to, especially not when one of them is Marcus. Mm-hmm. I just, no. Is anybody prepared for that, really? No. Thank you, Fire Raven. There is only one right number. Thank you. Very much appreciated. Boob.
Actually, amusingly enough, having run Marcus as a GM when he was on Leviathan, he is, or can be, very cognizant of where a story is going and wanting to like make choices that will contribute to a narrative. It was really interesting having him as a player because he was not nearly as Chaos Muppet as the Chaos Muppets that I have. I'm looking at one of them right now.
Oh. I'm sorry. I want to state that this is an earlier conversation. I always provide a solution.
Yep.
But I also propose weaknesses.
Claudia, I am never going to be upset about having you as one of my players. I hope you're aware of that.
Here is the good thing that you want. And also, I have proposed a consequence because I imagined it in my head.
Yep.
Nothing's wrong. Drift the ship. Turn off half of it. It's fine.
I think my favorite was when we were prepping for the very beginning of Leviathan, and Cheryl was like, I am going to play a much more Chaos Muppety character, like, and my internal mantra is literally, what would Fang do?
Paladin Health, thank you for that $6.61. Indeed, there is only one right number. Now they're fighting about whether it should be a boob or end in .69. We are such a mature community.
Yeah, we really
I'm
are.
so proud.
We
So
really
proud.
are.
So yeah.
So I genuinely, I
Is
am
that a
never.
puppy? Yes. One of our neighbors next door does have a dog. It's actually a very nice dog.
Oh, I have to go say hi to it at some point. I am never upset about having unpredictable players. It is actually something that I like to have because I don't use unpredictable as a negative term. I also don't use it to mean like what's the word that I'm looking for? Like players who are not participating or kind of contributing to a narrative. When I think unpredictable players, I mostly just mean that they typically find a unconventional method of solving a problem. And thus why I'm at a point where I plan by problem and not by anything else. To the point that I believe tonight's planning, I'm like, okay, I've got to do some setup stuff. I've got some like narrative beats that we want to get to, and I have one point in it, and I'm literally like, this is the problem, and then a bunch of fucking question marks. I'm like, here are like 2 things that might happen, but I have no idea how they're going to feel about it.
And I mean, like, honestly, introducing Dan's new character is going to take up a huge amount of time.
Yep, introducing Dan's going to take up a lot of time because Dan is a diva.
Yes.
Question:
hilarious diva.
How do I deal with unpredictability in a very story-heavy game like Good Society versus a game like D&D? What's interesting is that Good Society was so unpredictable that I really, my planning strategy was way different than it is with anything narrative. And also because Good Society is much more egalitarian in terms of who is doing the core of the storytelling. Like, I had maybe slightly more only because I controlled more of the NPCs. But fundamentally, the way I planned Good Society was eventually got down to I would make notes of a couple of important things that came up in the last episode that I would maybe want to come back to. And then I would write down like a list of possible scenes that could occur in case the players didn't have things that they knew they wanted to do. And normally I would only ever need that for the first scene because then the players were like, no, I want to do this. I need to talk to this person. It was similar when I ran Monster Hearts. It was like, I was like, okay, here's what all like possible scenes that we'll encounter. Here are the NPCs, what their goals are. And then I basically just got to a point where I was like, all right, what does everyone want to do? And I wrote them on a Post-it note and crossed them off as we did them. So those were, in those sorts of story-heavy ones, I'll focus on a couple of possible scenes. So I've got some stuff to pull from in case the players don't have something to drive. And then I will also write down, like, what are NPC motivations. So, like, my most important NPCs, what do they want? So if I need to and they get pulled into a scene, or I can throw them into a scene to cause a problem, or I can start a scene with one of the NPCs and one of the players because the NPCs want stuff. A Good Society was a story-heavy sandbox. I had no plot for that because it is 100% directed by the motivations of the players' characters. And so all I would do is set up. I also wrote down a list of locations so that I could vary where they would meet up and be like, they're at church now. And a list of like pairings of NPCs and players, or just players that would want to meet up. And that was it. That was my planning. So my Good Society notes were a lot more taking notes during a session than planning beforehand. I had so many schemes, but that was writing down what NPCs wanted, what their motivations were. And that's another way you can approach it too, is who are your NPCs and what do they want? Because then you can always go back to that.
Yep. Magpie Mirror Test was asking, do you have any tips, frameworks for prepping narratives or problems on the fly when you didn't get a chance to prep the situation, or say they ended up in a random one?
Yes. Frameworks for prepping narrative problems on the fly. Random encounter tables or sort of equivalents of that can genuinely be really helpful to have stuff to pull from. And I would say that's sometimes where I go with over planning. So I have just a little bit more to pull from, so I can always take from a previous week. I have done some things entirely on the fly, and a lot of that will just be listening carefully to what the players do and being reactive to that. So the players do something, I can have a reaction to it. And my main suggestion for that is you're going to be most successful in a system that you're familiar with. That's kind of the main thing. Knowing your NPCs and knowing your world state, that comes back to our kind of management of the world state, is that if you know what's going on in the world of the characters, you can be like, aha, here is a problem that's happening in the world. I can throw it in your faces. James Blatterman, that's a really good question, and the answer is I have not, but I can direct you to a bunch of people who have tried to teach real-life concepts or consequences in games. Megan Saidi, who is on Right Click, she is a clinical psychologist who works and runs social skills groups using Dungeons & Dragons. There's also a group based out of Seattle called Game to Grow, and they do a similar sort of thing. They use games to essentially teach skills and particularly social skills. And those are the two main ones. So I'd look at clinical role, I'd look at Megan's ID, and I'd also look at Game to Grow. And they will all lead you to this lovely nexus of people that are utilizing D&D in a therapeutic manner. And other RPGs too.
Nathalion, thank you for that donation. Can Dan play Diva? Please, I think some of the mods agree with me on this. They want to see him shout, "Nerf this."
Nerf this. I have, yeah, thank you for those links to Chat Paladin. Game to Grow is actually Seattle-based, and they're lovely humans, so hopefully someday we will maybe bring them on to an episode of this, and they can talk about specifically GMing when you're doing those sorts of things, which would be super cool.
In success, all good things. Well, it's interesting because the longer we're up and running, the more people I find out about in Seattle that are doing amazing things and that are passionate about games in their respective ways, and like it's just, yeah. And it for me it gets a little overwhelming where it's like, okay, I need to talk to all of the people and bring them all on board. This is okay, how are we going to broadcast an entire city on a single Twitch channel? Oh dear. Like, that's the level it feels like it's at sometimes, where it's like, oh, I just need to broadcast all of Seattle.
Yep.
But again, wind down, Friday at 8 p.m.
But yeah, so there are organizations you can take a look at that are doing really cool things with that. And I think they're actually publishing modules soon that's going to go up on Kickstarter or game like Indiegogo or something like that. Magpie Mirror, how does my jamming style / preference compare with other GMs you've played with? Or more, I think your follow-up was more specifically, what personal differences do you notice? I have, I think, slid more and more into the narrative storytelling compared to other GMs that I have played with. And my style is definitely, compared to others, less prep, more improv. I can, like, compare to Claudia, I see her prep and I'm like, man, I don't prep enough. But that's a different style. Like, I have a different comfort level with, and that's not a criticism, but like that's an example of a different style that I'm just more like, yeah, fuck it, I'll deal with it on the fly.
And generally speaking, like historically speaking at any rate, like you are still way more prep than I usually do, which is perhaps a problem. Evie, thank you once again. Even $100. Thank you. That's this show paid for.
You're all wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
But that's, which also I don't want to point out, Claudia still does a fuck ton of improv because we were unpredictable players. But it's just a different, like, that's an example of a different strategy. I think you are similarly narrative driven.
Yeah. But I also think the way that we think about planning is very different.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pop in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, please do.
Join us as a preview in the last 3 minutes.
Hi. I don't plan unless there's a notebook in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think about the game unless I see that notebook. The way I process my thoughts is to write as fast as I possibly can until all the words go on the paper. So, like, that is just a me writing. I think you actively, and you probably do as well, plan in your head before you start.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, I get that, like, I don't want to be like, I think you should definitely, if you're planning, know what's going to happen, but, like...
But that's actually really interesting because I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Because I frequently have conversations with myself as my NPCs. Like that, I literally will rehearse things that will never happen. And I do this as a player as well. I'll just like have fake conversations. If you ever see me walking down the street, there's 75% chance I'm talking to myself. And so I will, that is me, like that is part of my planning process. And then by the time I'm sitting down and writing down, I've normally got a lot of it thought about beforehand.
Yeah, so I do the stream of lots and lots of planning, and then I cross out what I don't like. And there's like constantly changing, but I think that's it's just like, how do you work, and setting aside the side that you need to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And yours is, I guess, talking to everybody on the street.
Yes. Yeah. It's different strategies for planning, and I would also say that I've worked with other GMs that are less narrative focused and are definitely more. I'd probably put them more in the simulationist category or gamist category of like they're kind of generally stick more to the rules, and like have different expectations for like how much you write down or how much you will remember as a character or as a player. And that's not a bad thing. I always try and switch up my expectations. Like knowing who my GM is changes how I feel when I sit down at a table.
Yeah.
So I think differently when I sit down as a player, differently when I sit down at your table, as opposed to like, say, when I go on Roll For It with different GMs.
So we do need to wrap up so that we can prep for Leviathan's return tonight in 3 hours.
Yeah.
This many.
This many.
3 hours. Not 9 hours, 3.
Wait, we can all do it. Wait, you were doing it that way. Here, we'll all do it differently.
Cool.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm excited.
I am also excited too. I'm very, very excited, and I
Also
need to tell you about Dan and the plan.
Oh dear. Oh dear. So thank you all very, very much for tuning in. Thank you for letting us hit goal for this particular show.
That's nice.
I will probably, since we're even, I'll probably update it so that it's accurate for the week, so that we know everybody knows where we're at. So in 3 hours, Leviathan Distant Stars returns for season 3. I'm super excited. Dan returns tonight as well. And then on Friday, we're doing a one-shot of a game called BFF. Hopefully one of the mods can get that link
I
back
just
into
read the
chat for us.
rules.
Claudia's
Actually,
gonna be on it.
I can possibly, let's see if this will work. Nope.
Nope.
Oh well. And GM Couch Hype, thank you very, very much for that donation as well. So, that one will go towards the actual goal. It's fine. And then after BFF by Ross Kalman and his mother, which is
really
funny to
cute.
say. Then we will be doing a wind down where I will talk about with whoever wants to hang out with me after the BFF show or swing by, and we will have some wine, and we will talk about where the studio is, where the studio is going, the shows that I have planned and what's happening with what, and in particular the fundraising event that we are going to do on the 26th, which is kind of important because we're running out of money again. Sorry. I tried really hard. I just cannot keep the money tree alive. I tried.
It's really hard.
It's possibly because we're in a basement. I don't know. But
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So,
Iffy, the players for the BFF show definitely confirmed. I have Drunkly Romantic,
That's not me.
Jackie Dash,
That's me.
Sour Fruit Junkie, and I'm waiting to hear back on an official confirmation from the fourth player. But worst comes worst, as far as I have been able to figure out from reading the rules, it's not really a directed story.
Yeah.
So I will also be playing a character in it.
I'm gonna make a storyline because
So
that's my
I'm
jam.
sure you will.
Worst case is we end up with 4 people because the director is also. It's good.
The facilitators, probably. Yeah.
I'm excited because I've read the rules and I'm like, the thoughts I had were not the thoughts that are true.
They're also
Wondering
pretty
what's gonna
simple.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
gonna be
very
fun.
cute. So we're actually going to be doing the character creation process partially on screen too.
It's a part of the game. It needs to happen on it.
All right. So Leviathan Hype.
Go! Get out of here! Get out!